Welcome.
Welcome to the Everything Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be recapping Superman and Lois Season 1, Episode 1, titled Pilot, which was originally released on the 23rd of February 2021, and I'm recording this episode about 4.5 years later on the 21st of August 2025. But before I get on with my recap, here is the Superman and Lois Season 1 trailer.
Our dad told us all these stories about growing up here.
Tell you it sucks?
Actually, I think he kind of loved it.
We came here as a family.
It's too dangerous for them to know.
It's more dangerous if they don't.
You're Superman? No, we've seen Superman before. We've seen him.
You told the boys you're Superman. Couldn't mind them anymore. This is gonna keep my family together. Clark, it's gonna tear it apart.
All the times you were gone, you lied to me, you both did.
I can't just abandon the world.
The world will always need Superman. Right now, this family needs you more.
Superman and Lois, 2-hour premiere event Tuesday, February 23rd. Stream free next day, only on the CW app.
That was the trailer for Superman and Lois Season 1, and I'm showing that because right now I'm doing my recap of Superman and Lois Season 1, Episode 1, titled Pilot. Clark mentions his memory. Clark mentions arriving on Earth, meeting his adopted parents, Smallville, Clark's dad's death and funeral, Metropolis. Clark saves someone. This person thanks Clark whilst complimenting Clark's costume. Clark reveals his mum made him this costume. Clark and Lois meet. Lois insults Lombard. Lois mentions baseball. Lois and Clark introduce themselves to each other. Clark apologizes to Lois. Clark corrects himself about meeting Lois. Clark reveals he is Superman to Lois. Clark proposes to Lois. Clark and Lois kiss. Clark and Lois get married. Clark and Lois move in together. Clark introduces Jonathan and Jordan. Clark and Lois attempt to help Jordan. Clark mentions Jordan being diagnosed with social anxiety disorder. Clark reveals Lois, Jordan and Jonathan are currently living in Metropolis. Sam summons Clark. Clark uses his heat vision. Clark showcases his increased strength by lifting a block of ice. Clark uses this icebox to stop a nuclear reactor from exploding. We then have the Superman and Lois title sequence. Clark updates Sam. Sam mentions Lois, Jonathan and Jordan. Clark says goodbye to Sam. Clark returns home. Clark and Lois reunite and kiss. Lois updates Clark. Clark interrupts Jonathan talking to Eliza. Jonathan informs Clark that he is now a quarterback. Clark is excited by this news. Clark speaks to Eliza. Clark mentions his pride for Jonathan. Jordan is playing a video game which involves fighting Superman. Jordan insults Superman. Clark apologizes to Jordan. Clark checks in with Jordan about his feelings around starting high school. Jordan mentions Smallville and Metropolis. Clark reminds Jordan that he's here for him. Jordan asks Clark to return his music to the usual level. Clark does this. Clark has received a missed call from his mum. Clark calls his mum. Clark alludes to his responsibility as Superman. Clark's mum compliments Clark. Clark's mum mentions Clark's dad. Clark's mum also mentions Smallville. Clark notices something isn't quite right with his mum. Clark says goodnight to his mum. Clark makes Jonathan scrambled eggs. Lois mentions Clark's mum. Jonathan insults Smallville. Clark helps Lois with her dress. Jonathan and Jordan insult each other. Jonathan and Jordan hug Lois. Lois reminds Jonathan and Jordan of her love for them. Clark says goodbye to Jonathan and Jordan. Clark and Lois discuss Jordan. Lois mentions Clark learning who he really was at age 6. Lois believes Jonathan has powers. Clark mentions the Fortress of Solitude. Clark mentions Jordan. Clark relates to Jordan. Clark and Lois disagree over telling Jonathan and Jordan about Clark being Superman. Clark mentions Sam. Lois mentions Morgan Edge. Clark gets fired. Lois insults billionaires. Lois mentions journalism. Clark helps Lois get some food. Clark learns that something has happened to his mum. Clark returns to his mum's house. Dr. Fry informs Clark what happened to his mum. Clark sees his mum's body. Clark gets emotional. Clark's mum's funeral takes place. Clark remembers attending his dad's funeral. Lois hugs Clark. Jonathan gets lunch for him and Jordan. Jonathan mentions Jordan's medication. Someone informs Clark and Lois that they have to sell. Lois expresses her sympathies. Clark uses his super hearing to notice that Lana and Kyle have arrived. Jonathan and Jordan discuss Sarah. Jonathan mocks Jordan. Lana hugs Clark and Lois. Lois introduces Jonathan and Jordan. Kyle introduces Sarah and Sophie. Sarah insults Kyle. Sophie knows that Clark and Lana used to date. Sarah mentions puberty. Jordan mentions the barn. Sarah promises to keep Jonathan and Jordan safe. Lois compliments Sarah and Sophie. Lana compliments Clark. Lana believes Clark doesn't age. Lana believes Lois is a role model. Lana mentions her and Kyle's jobs. Clark reveals where multiple people he used to know now lives, thanks to some assistance from Kyle. Kyle insults Clark. Lois, Lana and Kyle discuss Morgan Edge. Lois insults Morgan Edge. Lois mentions the Daily Planet. Kyle insults the Daily Planet. Lois and Kyle disagree. Kyle mentions Smallville. Kyle compliments Morgan Edge. Kyle mentions Clark's mum. Lana asks Kyle to get Sarah and Sophie. Lana asks Kyle to go to her bank tomorrow. Lana compliments Clark's mum. Sarah agrees with Clark. Sarah mentions Metropolis. Jonathan attempts to backtrack. Sarah asks for Jordan's phone. Jordan gives Sarah his phone. Sarah informs Jordan of a bonfire taking place tomorrow. Sarah warns Jordan. Lois mentions Kyle. Clark mentions Smallville. Lois attempts to reassure Clark. Clark mentions his mum. Clark reveals his mum wanted him to return to Smallville. Jonathan warns Jordan. Jordan falls. Jonathan saves Jordan. Sarah shouts out for help. Sarah updates Clark. Clark uses his strength to help Jonathan and Jordan. Jonathan learns he and Jordan only have concussions. Clark says thank you to a paramedic. Jonathan and Jordan go to bed. Jonathan mentions football. Jordan is confused why he and Jonathan are fine. Jonathan mentions Sarah giving Jordan her phone number, not him. Jonathan steals Jordan's phone. Jonathan insults Jordan's texting as well as Jordan himself. Jordan believes there is something he and Jonathan don't know. Jonathan insults Jordan. Lois checks on Clark. Clark mentions Jonathan and Jordan. Clark and Lois believe Jonathan has powers. Clark mentions Superman. Clark believes he can't lose Jordan. Lois mentions Clark being fired. Jordan's anxiety disorder and Clark losing both his parents. Clark informs Lois that Sam is here. Sam updates Clark. Clark recognizes Kryptonian, the Kryptonian language. Sam asks Clark to be Superman tonight. Lois refuses this. Clark agrees with Lois. Sam mentions his previous warnings to Lois as well as Clark and Superman. Clark and Lois visit Lana's bank. Lois and Lana discuss Jonathan and Jordan. Lana reminds Clark of an accident they both had. Lana informs Clark and Lois why Clark's mum took out another mortgage. Lana mentions Clark's mum's plan for Jonathan and Jordan. Lana informs Clark and Lois of their other options regarding Clark's mum's farm. Jonathan and Jordan explore the barn. Jonathan and Jordan mention Jordan's suspicions of Clark. Jonathan insults Clark. Jordan insults Jonathan. Jonathan and Jordan unlock a door. Jonathan mentions Clark's dad. Jonathan and Jordan discover Clark's pod. Jordan touches Clark's pod. Jordan finds a crystal within Clark's pod. Clark mentions his memories. Lois corrects Clark. Clark mentions his and Lois's financial situation. Lois is suspicious of reverse mortgages. Clark reveals he has super smell. Jordan confronts Clark about what he and Jonathan found in the barn. Clark admits to lying to Jonathan and Jordan. Clark informs Jordan and Jonathan that he is from Krypton as well as he is Superman. Clark showcases his powers as Superman to Jonathan and Jordan. Lois defends Clark to Jonathan and Jordan. Lois mentions Jordan's mental health issues. Clark defends Lois to Jonathan and Jordan. Clark and Lois admit their thoughts on Jonathan potentially having powers. Jordan insults Clark and storms off. Jonathan asks Clark and Lois to leave him and Jordan alone. Clark mentions Jordan. Lois mentions something she believes is human. Lois convinces Clark to be Superman. Clark speaks to someone. The person Clark talks to knows that Clark can't see through lead. Jordan and Sarah reunite. Sarah mentions Jonathan and Jordan's accident as well as Metropolis. The person Clark talks to admits his planet no longer exists. Clark and this person fight. Sarah convinces Jordan to not drink. Sarah compliments her early childhood. Sarah mentions sadness and the flu as well as her parents. Sarah gives Jordan an example of what Kyle must deal with. Sarah admits to taking some of Lana's medicine. Sarah mentions therapy. Jordan attempts to reassure Sarah. Jordan kisses Sarah. Sean attacks Jordan. Jordan learns that Sean and Sarah are boyfriend and girlfriend. Jonathan saves Jordan. Jonathan and Sean fight. Someone else attacks Jordan. Clark crashes into a shop. Clark attempts to use his heat vision and ice breath on the person he is currently fighting. Jordan's heat vision activates. Jordan uses his heat vision to save Jonathan. The person Clark was fighting injects Clark with kryptonite. Lois is on the phone. Lois cuts this phone call short. Lois attempts to summon Clark. Clark remembers multiple memories from his life with Lois, Jonathan and Jordan. Clark removes the kryptonite from him. Clark reunites with Jonathan and Jordan. Kyle updates Clark. Clark thanks Kyle. Jordan reveals he has saved Jonathan multiple times. Clark mentions Jordan's powers manifesting. Jonathan compares Kryptonian powers to cars. Lois asks Jonathan to apologise to Jordan. Clark admits that Lois was right about telling Jonathan and Jordan that he is Superman. Clark mentions his mum and Metropolis. Clark believes that his mum wanted him to return to Smallville. Lois mentions Superman. Lois agrees with Clark about his mum. Clark and Lois kiss. Clark and Jordan reunite. Clark mentions his dad. Clark admits that Jordan was right. Clark promises Jordan to be there for him always. Clark hugs Jordan. Clark reveals that he isn't going to sell the farm. Lois informs Lana of something regarding the bank she works for. Clark mentions Galaxy Holdings and Morgan Edge. Lana mentions Smallville. Sarah updates Jordan and Jonathan. Sarah mentions Kyle. Jordan apologises to Sarah for kissing her. Jonathan leaves Jordan and Sarah to have a private conversation. Sarah mentions Sean. Sarah asks Jordan to keep her life secret. Jordan agrees to do this. Jordan attempts to talk to Jonathan about his powers. Jonathan doesn't have an issue with Jordan having powers and him not having them. Clark and Lois float the idea of moving to Smallville to Jonathan and Jordan. Jordan mentions Superman, as does Jonathan. Clark plans on showing Jonathan and Jordan how to do some farming tasks. The Machine mentions kryptonite, and Machine refers to the man who attacked Clark as Captain Luthor. And that is my recap of Superman and Lois Season 1, Episode 1, titled Pilot. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of the Superman and Lois Season 1, Episode 1, titled Pilot. If you watched it, my recap. If you didn't, you can put your thoughts on both of those in the comments below, as well with anything else you want to call the channel, such as any previews or recaps. Put those in the comments below, as well as remembering you can also like, comment and subscribe. And just a reminder that now 2 episodes of the podcast released every single day, with the first episode released at 11 AM GMT and the second episode released at 3 PM GMT. And just a reminder now, multiple formats that you can now enjoy the podcast. Obviously YouTube, as per always, watch the episodes. Please continue to do so, as Matt spends hours and hours and hours on the episode, so I really want you to see what Matthew adds to the episode instead of just the audio that obviously I provide when I can. But if you are just looking for an audio-only version, if you go over to the podcast X page, which is you just type in Xing with the Everything Podcast, you should be able to find it. Find one of the links itself, so new podcasting, it says check out on Spreaker. There'll be a link, click on that and you can listen to the episode instead of watching it. But without further ado, I will see you in a future episode of the podcast. See you then. Goodbye.